Hello everybody, this is Carol and I am not in my sewing room. I'm actually in our dining room come music room again. So I thought I'd show you the next stage. I have my 3 pattern pieces, very crudely drawn, I must admit, cut out. I know I didn't iron the paper beforehand, and I don't know why, because I always iron my pattern pieces, but I was just so excited to get going. Next time I would definitely, in fact I've ordered a roll, I've got a roll here of pristine smooth pattern paper, so next time it will all be smooth. So I have my 3 pattern pieces and I have got some fabric out of my stash. It's a viscose. Now, I'm not sure what I was going to do with it. I've had it a long time. I'm not particularly bothered about it if anything does go wrong. It is very pretty if it goes right, but I'm going to use this because I think it'll gather nicely on the sleeve, but I'm not too worried if it doesn't come out well. So I'm going to go ahead and pin on the pattern pieces and see how it goes from there. So I've laid my fabric out. I've smoothed it out as much as possible. I've brought the 2 edges in, so I've got 2 folds either side. This is the way I normally cut out. If I do anything wrong, then it's just the way I do it. Everybody does things differently, but that's the way I do it. Very luckily, the 2 pattern pieces are going to fit just, I will say just, either side. So I'm going to go ahead and so we had these was placed on the centre fold, so we were lucky because it was 2 front bits. So I'm going to go ahead and pin this on. It will start from the centre, and this is where I see whether I cut it out straight or not. Now I don't use many pins, I don't use pattern weights, I just never got the hang of them. So I'm just going to pin round the outside, here and there. Funny thing for me is it won't have any notches, and I did a whole thing about having notches in patterns. So that's one done. I'm just going to go ahead and do the other one. Now this was the interesting pattern piece here because I couldn't work out what straighter grain was. This was the piece and it has got a little arrow, so I'm assuming that that is the straight of grain. So I've placed it like that, and I gather you need to cut 2, so I'm going to pin that one. All the pattern pieces are pinned on, all 3 of them, and I have my scissors and I'm going to start cutting it out. Don't you just love the crunch of fabric when you make those very first snips? And I got no notches. This is going to make me quite nervous actually, not having any notches to match up. But come on, I can do this. I've been sewing for years. Trouble with this room, I've always got to be moving the chairs around everywhere. Now I'm going to share with you my favourite bit from cutting out patterns. So when you cut out that first piece, initially you have no idea what it's going to look like, but when you cut out that first piece and then you hold it up, you start to get an idea of what your top or whatever you're making is going to look like. So I've got my 3 pattern pieces, and this was what I was aiming for. That's the back version where you've got a bit of gathering, and there is this square neckline. And that's what I'm going to have to really think about, how to finish that. Whether I'm going to have to make a facing or I'm going to do bias binding in the square. Now that's not going to be easy with this corner here, but I think it's something I'm not going to worry about for now. I'm going to take it each stage as it comes and see how I get on. It's trying to decide how much is gathered on the front and on the back. On the back it looks like it's only gathered just there and there because it ends there, but on the front it looks like it's gathered the whole way across, which actually looks different to the initial image. This was the front view, and as you can see, it really does show that it's just a bit of gathering there and there. Can I just also say that I showed my husband this, and he said, wow, he said, look at that skirt with those double pockets. He said, why can't you do that? One step at a time, eh? Let's just go for the simple top first before we tackle something with that double pocket. But I must admit, it is quite ingenious. So this is the front, and I've gathered a small portion, just 2 rows of stitching either side. I've kept it very fluid for now because I want to see what it looks like when I add the shoulder on. I've done about the same for the back. This is rising up though. Let's see what happens. On the mannequin, I have got a pinned version of just kind of piecing it together, see what it may look like. That's the shoulder portion, and then the gathering. I wanted to see how much it needs any more gathering. I actually don't think it does, because the sleeve is going to come up even shorter if I do, and I don't want this brought in anymore. I'm a bit worried. I've tucked under for now the seam allowance, but I'm a bit worried about the neckline coming up quite high. The back, again, just a little bit of gathering either side, and obviously it's going to look very different when the side seams are put together, but that is it for now. So I'm going to try it on. I've sewn in the front shoulder seams just with that little bit of gathering either side. Before I did that, I actually did a narrow hem. Still not sure how I was going to do it, whether I do a facing, but to be honest, I'm just gone and done a narrow hem to finish those shoulders. I've serged it all the way along, so this has got serged edge, and do you know what? All I'm going to do is I'm going to tuck that under, and I'm going to finish the top stitch and meet that top stitch along there. I'm not going to worry too much about it. I'm going to do the same on the back. After doing the shoulder seams, both sides, I've finished. I've done the hem at the bottom. All I did was serge it, and then I did 2 rows of stitching. I was a little bit lazy and didn't get out my twin needle because I didn't want it to pull in on the back. So I actually just did 2 rows of stitching, bit of a cheat. And for the armholes, first of all, I had to bring them up a bit. They dropped down a little bit too low, so I moved them up an inch, and all I've done is made some very narrow bias binding and just done those on the sleeves. So this is the finished top. A few things I like to say about it. I mean, it does help that the fabric is really pretty. I do quite like the square neck. I don't possess any square neck tops, so that worked out quite well. And the nice bit of gathering. I wouldn't want any more gathering there because it would bring it up way too much. But I actually quite like the shape of it. I think I may have slipped up on the hem. In my summary, I'll show you why. It is quite short, but if you look in on the original pattern, they actually had it tucked in. So I do quite like it. The back is the square neck as well. I'm actually quite pleased that this is the first thing I have drafted, yes, with a bit of help from the Lutterloh system, but I quite like it. It's a nice breezy top. I would definitely keep the pattern and make it again. Yeah, very pleased. So that concludes my first ride on my Lutterloh journey. It has been a little bit bumpy. So to summarise it, I made that top there from 1976. Here it is here. Now, the couple of things that I did do that I know, one thing, a very kindly lady called Janet pointed out that I made a seam allowance all the way around, and because these were placed on the fold, I did not need to add the seam allowance. It's worked fine because that was quite a floaty top. I don't know, because that would have been 3 centimetres. So what it would have been like if I had removed that. It might have been too tight, I'm not sure. And the other thing was, when you go below the waist, you're meant to use your hip measurements. So all the things above the waist are the bust, but below are the hip measurements. And I'm thinking these two measurements here should have been using my hip measurement, because that is a little bit tight. It does come in quite tight, but it's okay, but it looks all right, and I'm quite happy with that. So that's the thing I'm going to learn for next time. So I'm quite pleased with it. So I'm moving on a little bit in difficulty. I'm going to go next journey. I'm going to make the fitted top here, because that will prove that I'm doing the measurements correctly. It's also got a couple of things extra. It's going to have a dart in there, and you've got a sleeve to insert, because I bet it won't be done on the flat. I bet it'll be using an insert. And then here there's a little tiny little dotted line, and that means top stitch. So that's actually going to be an open back top. So I've got three very much more fitted. It's got a sleeve. It's got a dart I've got to put in and work out, because they never show you the depth of the dart apparently. You've got to kind of work it out. And I've got the top stitching, the split back to that point. So it's going to be good. I hope you come along on this journey number 2 with me. After this, I've done this one, I'm then going to move on to the more modern book. I got the supplement, I got number 320 from the swing, because that's when I can really move on to this. Particularly is what I want to aim to have a go at, but I don't want to waste this much fabric with doing something wrong just yet. So I want to build up my knowledge. I hope you've enjoyed this journey. I'd love to hear your comments, and if any of you that did have the Lutterloh books shoved in a cupboard somewhere, if you've managed to get it out and have a go yourself. Oh, great. I'll see you again soon.